And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to Lubbock Compact Live, our first one for 2022. I am your host, Adam Hernandez, here with my co-host, Dr. Nick Bergfeld, and our special co-host that's always a nice addition to the show, Mr. Josh Shankles.
Semi-permanent guest host. That's what title I'm pitching here.
Permanent guest host.
That's right. Permanent guest host. So yeah, feels good to be back. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and everybody who's going to watch this after we stream live. Thank you everybody. And so we have a lot of updates for you. Last week there was a city council meeting, and it focused mostly on the American Rescue Plan Act funds that are still there and available. And we told you about it on the last show, that they were kind of discussing some placeholders that they had where they were thinking about putting this money, and they hadn't really figured out the amounts yet. Well, all of that has kind of unfolded a little more. There has not been an official vote on it, but they're getting pretty close. And so we have a lot of updates on that. Good news is also there's a lot of extra money left there, and so we're going to maybe throw out some ideas of what we could do with the rest of that after we talk about that. And then we have the updates on Lubbock's electric utility situation. And so there's some big things coming there, and just stick around for the second half of the show, and that's what we're going to be discussing in that part. So let's get right into it. So I guess we'll go ahead and start off with naming the different placeholders they have here, and then we're just going to kind of go through these and discuss them one by one. So the placeholders are housing, cyber, which is cybersecurity, diversion, which is the diversion center, and this is the mental health facility for folks that are, it's not necessarily only for folks that are experiencing homelessness, but that will be a key part in that situation. Arts is another category, broadband, and that's a very specific project. We'll talk about that. Homelessness is a category in there. Job training, nonprofits, public safety improvements, and small business and parks. And so those are the categories that they had. They have some placeholders in here, and we'll talk about those as we go along. Myself, I was able to be at this meeting. Josh has watched the meeting, and Nick is up to speed on the meeting. So we're going to have some good conversations today. So yeah, on the housing part, now this is to be used for developing affordable housing. So there's an addition for those of you who don't know, in East Lubbock off of MLK, and it's called King's Dominion. It's a subdivision where they build new housing. And this subdivision was created through a similar process that they're going to use here. And so they have that set for $2.5 million, which is going to be two separate projects. And from what we understand, there's some talks with some contractors to do some things, but basically what this money is going to be used for, it's not that the city itself is going to be building the housing or anything like that. The city is going to be providing things like electric infrastructure and things of this nature, anything that needs to be put in to actually then start building. And then there will be partnerships with different entities to do that.
Yeah, and so that kind of model, if you're building an area of housing, new housing, and it used to be nothing before, there's a lot of costs as a developer that you take on. You take on the price of the roads inside of the neighborhood, you take on the pricing of getting electricity, getting plumbing there. And so what a city can do to try to help to promote new development, new residential development, is to say, actually, we're going to use some public finance to be able to effectively provide some of that infrastructure cost, so that the cost of building then ultimately comes down for the developer to be able to go there. The other benefit of it too is that for a developer, if you think about it, you have to put a lot of money down when it comes to those infrastructure investments. So before you sell a single house, you've got to have all the roads, you at least have to have the roads for the connectivity, you have to have electricity going there. That's pretty pricey. And so for somebody that's trying to build affordable housing, it's difficult to be able to put all that amount of cash up front, especially when you're not expecting to be building, say, 100 houses in a single year. So the King's Dominion is a great example of how this has worked in the past. where the city has essentially built some of the infrastructure out, worked with a development corporation called the Northeast Lubbock Development Corporation and some housing partners, and slowly over time, they've been able to build out that subdivision with partnerships and being able to do it so that nobody is having to take on a huge amount of cost up front to be able to get this housing built. And I believe Habitat for Humanity is taking that work forward in the Kings Dominion area and continuing to build that part out. And so it's really encouraging to see the city willing to put some dollars down to help to increase the amount of residential units that we're seeing in the eastern portion of the city.
Yeah, and so not too much more to say there. That's pretty much sums it up on that one. On the cybersecurity, and we talked about this a little bit the last time, and so there is a new piece to all of this right here, because the governor created a broadband development office in order to deal with, expanding broadband into rural areas and things of that nature. And so there's also the TEA, Texas Education Agency, is involved in this project as well with some funding. And from what I understand, the TEA funding is pretty much secured. The only thing that's that's in waiting is the letter of intent has been submitted by the city, which they had to submit that by the 1st of December, and they did. They submitted that to the governor's broadband development office. And the update at this past meeting this past week was that Lubbock has now moved forward to the short list. So it doesn't mean that we've gotten it yet, but we are one step closer there. And we should know something about that by about mid-February. We should know if we've received that or not. And if we do receive it, with all of that funding, our part to pay as a city would be 2.25 million, but you're looking at a project that's probably going to be around 9 million. And so we're going to get about 3 times the amount that Lubbock is going to put in from these agencies, which is really good. And the project is going to be in the northeast part of the city, but the service it's going to provide is going to be citywide. So it's not going to only serve that area of town. And so I think this is a good thing. I don't really think there's a way to make this a bad thing.
Right. No, exactly. And anytime, Lubbock, in Lubbock's history, we oftentimes are known for leaving money on the table. There are a lot of matching programs that exist at both the federal and state level that oftentimes are not necessarily one-to-one or even 1-to-2. In the example of the broadband case, it's closer to a 1-to-4. So for every dollar that we're putting in, we're essentially putting in 2 million and seeing a project that might ultimately come up to about 10. And anytime that you have that ability as a community to leverage that kind of ratio of your dollars invested, you really have to take a strong look at that opportunity. And broadband is something that we know from a 21st century standpoint is absolutely essential to the functioning, to being able to fully function in society. That, whether it be having parts of your work that are remote, whether it be in COVID time, your children having hybrid or full online classes, a lot of these gaps within our city's infrastructure when it comes to broadband have become more and more apparent, to the point where Lubbock ISD, things that they tried to do during that time were to set up Wi-Fi hubs in their parking lots so that family members could essentially drive their kids just simply to the school parking lots to try to have access to Wi-Fi. And so, yes, it's a temporary solution, but what it shows you is the need and the overall need that has been there in the community. And sometimes these sort of broadband companies are not incentivized appropriately to build connectivity to areas that, say, don't necessarily have a lot of population density, even if their need is very high. And so having these types of programs that allow for fiber to be laid in those areas, it just simply brings all of us together. And not only that, but what it means is that if new development happens in those areas, they will have access to broadband as well. And so it creates a beneficial amenity going forward for any kind of new developments that occur, because they'll be able to tap into that broadband infrastructure as well.
Yeah, and Josh, I know you deal with farming in your daily life. I'm sure that this would be very helpful to a lot of folks out in the farming world. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, Zoom is literally telling me right now that my internet connection is kind of tricky. And I think we've all kind of experienced this both in our professional lives, but also how we entertain ourselves, how we live such huge components of our lives. And so, it's becoming more like an essential utility. And we're going to need this piece to keep up with the rest of the nation and the rest of the world, frankly. So I think that's a really tremendous benefit to the whole town, and something that I think we've all kind of experienced the downsides of not making the appropriate investments in. So, I was really excited to see that as a piece of the whole picture.
Yeah, and so that's pretty much it. Go ahead.
May I hop in there to say that also that connected to that is this cybersecurity piece, right? And also municipalities and cities and hospitals and schools have seen a lot more cyber attack and a lot more loss of intellectual property and money on the cybersecurity front. And so a hunk of this money will be to address that and protect our city from being held hostage in this way. So, right. That's also an essential piece.
I'm glad you brought it back there, because I think I misspoke earlier. We were talking about the broadband project. So just to make that clear, the broadband project is $2 million that Lubbock puts up. Total project is $9 million. The cyber security that Josh just spoke about, that's for the city of Lubbock, to make sure that we're secure there. There's not a lot of details there because they're talking about that in their executive session because of the sensitivity of that. But the $2.25 million is for the cybersecurity. The $2 million is for the broadband. And so, yes, both very needed. Not really much to say on cybersecurity. I think everybody understands that one. So on the diversion center, so the deal with the diversion center is that it's going to be on land that's owned by StarCare. So where StarCare is now, it's going to be on that property. There's going to need to be some build out of the roads and things to accommodate all of this. And there's also, so Lubbock will be putting in $3.5 million, but the county will be matching that amount. And so this is a county-city partnership, which will actually work out pretty good, I think, because one of the main points of the diversion center is for folks who are experiencing homelessness. Let's say they're having some sort of mental health issue at the moment, and a law enforcement officer is called out, and they understand this person is having an episode or what have you. Instead of just having to take that person straight to jail, which causes all sorts of other issues, they can offer the person, or if there's a caretaker there that can make those decisions, they can offer for them to go to the diversion center instead, which is a treatment facility with trained people and all of the different things that they need to take care of somebody that's having a crisis. And that would be a better option to keep them from having to deal with all legal fees and everything else that comes with them going in and out of the jail system. So it makes a lot of sense for the county to be partnered on this.
And this has been developing as a great partnership. The origins of this proposal come from something called the Meadows Foundation report, which was a consortium of the Community Foundation of West Texas, Texas Tech, I believe the CH Foundation, possibly the United Way of Lubbock. A series of organizations came together to pay a very reputable and well-regarded foundation here in the state of Texas to do an assessment of the mental health needs of not just Lubbock, but the surrounding communities. And for anyone who's experienced a mental health crisis in this region, you know very well that the amount of resources that are available to you currently are very limited. And so one of the recommendations was that we needed to expand capacity of mental health beds within our community, of mental health treatment within our community, and also to embrace newer models of treatment where a person potentially could be treated at their own home or at a caretaker's home rather than having to be at a specific location. So there were a lot of needs that we had as a community that there was some type of model needed to come together to address them. And Texas Tech Health Sciences Center under Nancy Trevino has really led the creation of this great proposal for the creation of, it has several different names, but a mental health crisis center, you can think of it that way, that will have its own little campus on the Sunrise Canyon campus that StarCare owns. And so, this will be not just for individuals that are currently experiencing homelessness, but for community members, especially for those who have no place to go, who are experiencing a mental health crisis or a mental health episode and need treatment and need some place where they can go for some time and be able to essentially have that therapeutic environment that is so essential for being able to get back on your feet. And so this is something that's addressing a critical need, not just in Lubbock, but the surrounding community. And so to see the county involved in this is, I think, just really great. And I don't know if we'll talk about it later, but it also speaks to the value of a transition that's about to happen, where the city of Lubbock's public health department is also about to become the health authority for the county as well. And so I think this is one of the great examples of partnerships that are going to come about that. Lubbock, because of our size, we just have the ability to have specialized services that, say, smaller communities like, say, New Deal just simply can't afford to have. But we're close enough where if we did have those services, they would also be able to access them. And so it's a great example of Lubbock and what we are using our heft to being a great partner for our surrounding communities and the rural communities that we benefit from economically, and they rely on us for services.
Yeah, I think, I think it's a great thing as well. And I have some experience with this from my personal story. So my uncle had schizophrenia, and that was a very intense thing for our family to deal with. And so I witnessed a lot of this at a very young age, the officers being called, him having to go to an MHMR facility in Big Spring because there was nothing here. And then we also have another person or family, that still lives in that same neighborhood where my grandma's house is. And they also have a family member who is constantly in crisis due to mental health issues. And same thing, you're seeing, ambulances being called out, officers being called out. All of this stuff costs money and just causes a lot more trouble than it's really worth. And so, and I'm sure that so many of you out there have dealt with this within your own family. So I think I find it comforting. I would have liked to have, I think if my grandma would have had that option when my uncle was going through what he was going through, and unfortunately he ended up taking his own life due to that condition. But if she would have had that option, there's no doubt in my mind that my grandma would have rather sent him to a diversion center where he could get calmed down, get medication if necessary, or whatever the case, versus having to go to jail and incur all those costs. So I think it's a really good thing. So the next category here, little lighter subject matter, is arts. Pretty straightforward. This will obviously go to different arts, nonprofits and things of this nature. It could also go to other things. I mean, there's not really anything fleshed out with this right now, really with all of these. Some of them have specific details, as we've pointed out, but some of these are just kind of like broad categories that they're putting money aside for, and then they'll work out those details as these things go along. But they have $1 million in there for arts right now, which is a decent amount. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, for this component, because I know that there are a lot of artists that do watch us. So the city is currently in conversations with the Lubbock Arts Council to be able to figure out a fair and appropriate way for who will receive those dollars. And so there has been conversations around wanting these dollars to kind of touch sort of single entrepreneurial artists, sort of smaller scale nonprofits. And so if you follow the Lubbock Arts Council, definitely reach out to them to get more information there. But there will be a standardized application. If you do, I know for a lot of you, you don't necessarily maintain your balance sheet or your books or your receipts, but definitely to get prepared for that, try to have some bank statements of costs to sort of talk a little bit about in the numbers, how you've had some, where you can show some kind of impact as a result of the COVID journey that we've all been on together, because that'll help you make your case, when these applications go out. But, seeing that allocation there, people are trying to figure out the appropriate way for determining need, and the Lubbock Arts Council will play a significant role in making those determinations.
Yeah, and I have full confidence that Ms. Stacy Keith and team over there will do a great job with that. So of course we'll stay on top of that and keep you all informed. And in the meeting, they talked about arts, the nonprofits, and small business all at the same time. So we can just go ahead and do that, because not that they're the same thing, but the programs and the way they're rolled out are similar. And so for the nonprofits, this is actually something that was brought up, that nonprofits have actually, and it's something I didn't even think about, but nonprofits were not really, they didn't really get a lot of money out of the COVID relief funds that the federal government did. But what I learned at this meeting is that when they did the West Texas Fund, that was a kind of a Lubbock's COVID relief fund, right, for businesses. It was mostly for businesses, but they also did use that to help some nonprofits. So there were some that benefited, but overall, a lot of nonprofits didn't see anything out of that. And a lot of those have a lot of costs, just like any other business. And so they put $1 million in there, I believe, to help with the nonprofits. And then with the, let's see, small business, they're doing $5 million.
Small
and
business.
So this is, yes, small business. And so they are kind of how they're thinking about this. And again, none of this is final, but the discussion has been amongst the council that they would like to focus this money on businesses who did not receive money from the West Texas Fund, or that didn't get a PPP or EIDL or anything like that. So if you have not, if you didn't get any of those at all, and you suffered losses due to the pandemic, I would encourage you to, once this is open, to apply for it. That money, now, this time it may not go as fast, because last time they did the West Texas Fund, I want to say it was 1.8 million, something like that. And that money was gone in 3 weeks. So, but this is 5 million. And the mayor brought up the point, and I actually agree with him on this. I think it's going to take him a little bit to burn through this 5 million. Because you're taking out a large chunk of folks who already have gotten money, and you're going to have to prove that you were affected by the pandemic and things. And so but from what the discussion was, the application process to get the West Texas COVID relief last time was very streamlined. From what I understand, I didn't go through it, but this is what they were talking about. It was very streamlined, not very difficult at all. It was a pretty quick process. They've also had that audited. And so, they know that it works, it's audited, it's solid. So they're going to basically take that model and do the same, of course, tweaking it for the different things, but do this a similar situation for arts and a similar situation for nonprofits. And that will take, probably several weeks before any of that starts rolling out.
Right. And something to think about is, and I really do want to give credit to the council on thinking about those who have not received relief funds in the past. In the Lubbock Compact, we actually did an analysis of the city of Lubbock in the locations of the payroll protection program recipients, and looked at, essentially created a heat map to see the areas of town. And it really shouldn't be surprising, the outcomes. We found that areas that predominantly were Black or Hispanic neighborhoods or parts of town generally saw a much lower number of PPP uptake. And that's for a lot of reasons. One of the biggest being that Black and Hispanic individuals oftentimes are folks who are running what we call micro enterprises. So these are where they have no employees besides themselves, or possibly 1 to 2 employees. Oftentimes, when you're that small, you're not necessarily keeping good accounts, and you oftentimes don't have a standing relationship with a bank. And so as a result of that, it was very difficult to access most of the COVID relief programs that were available for businesses. And so there was a big miss, and this happened in a lot of communities, of where these types of dollars from those programs went. And so now we even have some estimations of closures, small business closures across the United States that are coming out. These are not for Lubbock, so I don't want to make a critique here. But we do know that Black and Hispanic-owned businesses across the United States were disproportionately impacted during the COVID crisis. And so the numbers are quite startling. You know, I want to say that Black businesses, Black-owned businesses, had maybe a 4 times likelihood of closure versus say Caucasian, and for Hispanic was something 2 to 3-fold over Caucasian as well. So, you know, when you're thinking about why are these businesses sort of falling apart, it's not because they're owned by a Black person or they're owned by a Hispanic person. It's because of the nature of their access to finance. And so when it comes to how we're going to structure these small business dollars that are going in, I really, really hope we think about the micro entrepreneur. We think about the very, very small scale business owner. And you know, credit to the council, when you're trying to reach out to those individuals, you know, it does take time when it comes to doing outreach, when it comes to engagement, because these are folks that typically don't expect there to be programs that are available for them. They're not searching for that. They have no expectation of it. You know, we talked about this actually before, you know, our final wrap up last year. You know, Adam talked about his experience as a Hispanic entrepreneur and the pride that many entrepreneurs feel in that community when it comes to not wanting to accept help and feeling as though that they don't want to have access to these programs because they don't deserve it, because they think it's some kind of critique on their ability to function or their sense of patriotism. And that's the thing, is these dollars are available. They are supposed to be going to folks in the community. I do know that the county's fund is still up and running, I believe. So even though this program is not online yet, you can currently go to the county's website and access their small business relief programming. But what I hope to see going forward, I hope to see some programming on the side. I really hope to see some micro lending models come out of this 5 million. I hope to see some working capital loan models come out of this financing as well, because we have to think about what are the types of programs that are really going to reach sort of the small scale entrepreneurs who we now know were the hardest hit during the COVID crisis, and in my mind, some of the most deserving individuals in our community when it comes to getting economic development dollars.
Yeah. Great points. So next thing
I think
is,
I'll
go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, no, I think you guys have hit all the major points on this, except that I would add that a great city deserves great art, and our small businesses are only almost exclusively employing people in our city, in our town, in our region, that this money invested in the small business piece, in the arts piece, in the not-for-profit piece, creates much of the fabric of our community, many of the businesses that we all depend on, and then that money gets reinvested again by those same businesses in the form of payroll, in the form of local purchasing. And so this is kind of doubling down on that same investment to send it through our economic system twice or more at least.
Yeah, great point. Yeah. So the next category here is homelessness. So with the homelessness, this is there's nothing set in stone. They're setting apart 3.5 million for this, and from the very short discussion that was had on this, from what I understand, there's still an idea to have some sort of facility. It's not a shelter. It's not going to be a shelter like where people can stay. It'll be some sort of facility, or this is the thought, it'll be some sort of facility where folks who are experiencing homelessness can go and take advantage of the different organizations, different resources that are available to them. And so what that looks like, again, it's not really clear. There's nothing kind of set in stone. There's not a location that's been said or anything like that. And so we'll continue to watch that and see what information we can learn on that. But there's just not a lot there right now. And I just don't even know that they even have all of it together yet.
Yeah, you know, and this has been a continuing story. The city of Lubbock has struggled to find a solution that works from a policy level and works politically for them when it comes to what is it that we should be doing for individuals who are currently experiencing homelessness. And I think from the perspective of the Lubbock Compact, our thinking is really just best practices, and how do you follow the evidence? What are the types of solutions that you ultimately reach when you try to come to those conclusions? And, it really does come down to housing first. It comes down to finding ways to essentially provide appropriate services to an individual when they first are stabilized in a residential environment. And because the cost effectiveness of that is just so high. And so it's been a difficult, I think, conversation as a community, because for so many individuals, the idea of quote unquote rewarding an individual who is currently experiencing homelessness by providing them with housing, it just, there's something about it that seems inappropriate. And I think overall that dialogue and changing that and thinking about these individuals as part of our community. Every year there is a survey that is done called the Point in Time Count Survey of individuals that are experiencing homelessness in Lubbock. And one of the things that many people find surprising when we talk about these numbers is the fact that the overwhelming majority of those individuals come from Lubbock. They come from our community. These are not individuals that were riding on the railroads or going across roads or highways or the interstates, traveling in a transient way. These individuals who have fallen through the cracks, they fell through our cracks. They fell through the lack of social support, the lack of safety nets within our community here. And so they're a part of us. They're a part of our community. And we have to think about them in that way. And we have to think about what are the things that any dignified individual, right? That somebody that when we think about the dignity that we all deserve, that needs to be there. And so this has been a conversation that's gone back and forth for years now, on trying to find resolution. I'm optimistic about seeing a financial commitment on the city side to trying to tackle this issue. And it's really just sort of one of, what ultimately ends up being the solution that gets proposed that we'll really have to have a conversation, dialogue about.
Yeah. And so we will be watching this one very closely, of course, and keeping everybody up to date on that. I know a lot of our audience is very much engaged with that issue. So as are we. Yeah.
We have such great services already going on in town in this area. It's been encouraging to see us stepwise making progress in this with the homeless outreach team and the great organizations that work on this issue already. I like to make an analogy to like maintaining your car. You're either gonna pay and have your car maintained and in good working order, or you're gonna pay to repair your car. And so many things at this kind of level where you're looking at public funds and city services and state services are kind of similar to that, where we either need to make the investment to fix a problem up front, or we're going to end up making the investment on the back end side. And those back end side investments are always going to have worse outcomes, less humane outcomes. We just passed Martin Luther King Day. I was out at the service event at Booker T. Washington Garden. One of our key volunteers there for that event was a man experiencing homelessness that is in the community. And he was, such a contributor to that whole process that day. And, additionally, the man that rescued that baby in Hobbs was also a homeless man, and so these are people that, even as they stand, are providing value in our community, are people that our communities care about. And so it's encouraging to see us go stepwise by that. And I'm encouraged to see this additional investment. And I hope it does continue to knit those services together in a more robust way and really create a pathway where, we can be leaders in solving this problem.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. So the next category is job training. And then the only one we have two after that. One of them's real quick. But the job training, they have 2 million set aside for this, but they actually bumped that up because the city manager actually proposed to do that He had done some number crunching over the holidays and decided that that would probably that there needed to be more funds in there. Councilman Christian from District 5 agreed. He was actually the one that put the number forward as 3.5 million, and the council went ahead and decided to take that along to the next step of discussion. So for now, it's 3.5 million for job training. And so I really liked this conversation. Was very encouraging to me. As you all know, we've been reporting here that, and of course everywhere across the nation, staffing shortages are an issue in every business. The city of Lubbock is not immune to this. Every single department they have is understaffed. And as a matter of fact, as we're going around to the communities and connecting the different departments to community members and hearing everybody talk about this, a big part of our issue when you talk about codes enforcement, when you talk about things such as illegal dumping being taken care of, the issue with stray dogs and the animal control situation, and then anything dealing with solid waste. Part of it is funding, but the other part of it, it always comes back to is staffing, because they actually do have positions open right now that are not filled. And then they also, in addition to that, just depending on what the department is, each need some equipment or some different things as well, to where it's kind of a double whammy there that they're dealing with. And so with the job training, it was good to hear what they have in mind. And so the city is, of course, working with LIDA, which LIDA heads up a lot of things for the city, trying to recruit businesses to come here, trying to basically, foster the growth of Lubbock, I guess you would say. And so this is right up their alley. And so again, there wasn't a lot of details given, but the gist of it is that they're going to have some training. And it's a nonprofit that wasn't named. He said that they wouldn't name it until they were further along in the process. But there's a nonprofit that does job training, but not just for trades, also for careers. And then they also, in combination with that, have financial literacy as a component to that, where they can teach people how to be, how to budget a home, or they also teach them the soft skills of like how to maintain a job, how to keep a job, right? And things like that, if that's something that they need. And so it's kind of a comprehensive program from what it sounds like. And so that's going to be part of it. Another part of it is going to be organizations, and there's a few across the city that do this, but that are dealing with the trades. And they're gonna, the mayor has apparently been working on connecting with a lot of the contractor companies and things of this nature in Lubbock, and is gonna try to, or basically is forming a roundtable, for lack of a better term, of those folks to try to get their input and bring it all together to just try to get people working, but working here in Lubbock. That's the thing. And a big issue that was highlighted was that the most need that our community has is skilled people in the medical field. And so they're going to have some sort of situation to try to speed that up. Now, I know the city manager mentioned it, but I have a little more information on this as I've had talks with folks at Covenant. And I know that they have, and I'm probably going to mess the name up, but it's basically like a pipeline system to get people from lower kind of positions lower down on the ladder to get them trained for positions higher up the ladder. Developing, the different skills that they would need, and even developing skills for them to eventually be in leadership positions or administrative positions. So really trying to make it a situation where, it's not such a dead-end job or something like that, where somebody can actually see a career there. And so a lot of good things going on there. I'm all here for it.
Yeah, and there's just, just to piggyback off of that, Lubbock is a healthcare mecca for this region. We don't just service the city of Lubbock. The hospitals here service about 1.2 million people. That is the catchment area for everything that they do. And so the need that we have when it comes to healthcare workers is one that we just simply can never fulfill. And so having additional programming, finding ways to get people engaged, and building that pipeline. So in healthcare, they talk about no skill versus what are para-skilled professionals. So these are individuals like, say, nursing aides. So these are individuals that are helping to lift the elderly and helping to change them, helping to move them around, helping to make sure that they take their medicines on time, and going up from there when it comes to sort of the skill sets from a registered nurse to a nurse practitioner, to a physician associate, to all the way up to physicians. There are so many steps in that chain of skill sets, and each one of them is valuable. And oftentimes the skills you learn at one stage of that can be helpful for moving up into higher paid, better paying jobs. And so, thinking about how do you engage those individuals who, say, are working in healthcare as in a para-skilled role, how can you engage them about, hey, are you interested in sort of moving up? And then the other thing is, some of these roles can be trained in a pretty timely fashion when you have structured programs. So I know the CDC, and this is in the state of Texas, but another health department in a different state have piloted creating a sort of a boot camp for becoming a nurse aide and activating the National Guard within their state, and essentially training them to become that. And it's about 72 hours worth of training that's necessary to get there. But that sounds like a lot. But if you think about what if you sort of cram it all in and say maybe a 2 weeks period in time, you give people a stipend so that if they participate, they're not necessarily losing income because they're doing it. You can really start to get some throughput there. And so there's some great thinking on what's possible within the healthcare space. It's always going to be a need here, and it's going to be a transferable skill, something that a person can take wherever they go and is going to have relevance.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add is I would hope, and I don't think it's definitely not been brought up, but maybe I will bring it up. But I would hope that part of this, because again, talking to folks who are within the system, and this is not, let me preface this is not to down talk these institutions. They're great institutions, but at the same time, we have to recognize stuff when it's going on. And the general narrative is that there's some culture issues in these places. And so I would hope that some of this funding would be used for maybe training upper management, or having some programs to deal with how do you create a culture that's, I guess, more healthy or makes folks want to stay. Because if you have a culture where, the pay could be great, that, or the hours could be great, or whatever the case may be, but if it sucks to work there, everybody knows what that's like. At a certain point, they're not going to be able to pay you enough to make you stay there. And unfortunately in Lubbock, it doesn't take a lot to get to that point. And so I would hope that, again, it's not to bash those institutions. Some of the folks in upper management will tell you that from those institutions. So these are coming from conversations that I've had with those folks, and they're working on it. I'm not going to say they're not working on it. They definitely are working on it, but I bet they could work on it a lot better if they had a little boost of funding.
Yeah. And that's such a good point, because when you look at Lubbock, just simply in the numbers, and you say, when we think about, say, sexual harassment and creating a hostile work environment, it really shouldn't be a surprise when you look at our rates of, say, domestic violence in the city of Lubbock. We are a community that struggles to have conversations about gender roles, about gender dynamics, about sexual identity, about race. And these are hard conversations to have. And I think oftentimes what gets lost is that as people can kind of move up the leadership ladder, they don't necessarily gain the skills to learn the language, to become more aware of these issues and the fact that they are, not just in the work environment here in the city, but their challenges across the social life, across sort of the culture that a lot of us grow up with here. And it's something that I think is a really good thing to point out, that these are things we need to be more mindful of, better aware of, and creating those environments. Because one of the things that we know, especially for younger populations, for millennials, for Gen Zers, they don't put up with that.
Yeah.
They rank work environment and quality of life in the work environment very high. They rank it almost higher than the actual wages that they receive, the commute time that they have, the flexibility in working hours. right? Because now for these generations, they're really thinking about wanting to belong somewhere and wanting to feel like they belong somewhere. And so the social aspects of the work environment and feeling as though that you're welcomed and feeling as though that you're somebody who's being openly embraced as you as an individual has just become a major premium. And so it plays into the brain drain that we experience as a community. I've heard folks graduating from Texas Tech who feel as though that there's just a hostile culture here when it comes to the work environment, and they couldn't envision themselves wanting to stick around because of it. And these are incredibly talented people that we can't afford to lose from the future of our economy and where we need to go. And so I think that's a really great point. It's something that honestly is probably not talked about enough.
Yeah, and I'm probably seriously going to have to put it into the conversation, but I really do think it's really important. But we'll move along. So the public safety improvements area of this is a little tricky. I'm not sure how to feel about this one. And actually, the mayor did bring it up too. This would be things like how they did with the first kind of disbursements of this money, where they bought police cars and fire trucks and things of this nature. They have $2.5 million set aside. They didn't say that they're going to use that for anything in particular. I would assume that it's going to probably go to fire and police. But for right now, there's nothing specific for that. Now, if they are going to send it to the police, I know one thing that would be good to pursue would be creating, there needs to be some steps funded to make this happen, but basically do what the police chief was trying to do to create an LPD softball league, youth softball league, so that a mentorship situation could happen there. But anyway, that's the public improvement section. We'll keep you updated. We'll watch it. The last thing on here, and then we'll move on to the electric stuff, is parks. And this one is really quick as well. There's $3 million set aside here. Now, the $3 million, what it's going to be used for is for the pursuit of grants. And I'll explain. So in the world of grants, which are free money, basically, that you can get from different government organizations or different nonprofits, there's all sorts of places you can get grants. But grants are usually very specific to a certain purpose or a certain issue or a certain cause or something like that. And so in the parks world, from what was discussed, most of the grants that you're going to want, the really kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, the high value grants or things that can really move some stuff around, those are matching grants. And so that means you have to have money to put in there. And so this $3 million is basically set aside to have those matching funds in the pursuit of these grants. And then the city will put their grant writers to work, as Councilman Christian said, as the Parks Master Plan unfolds, or actually after it's done, and they'll use these grants to carry out some of the recommendations.
Josh, do you have any color on this? I'm just curious, in terms of, do you think that even in your mind, are there sort of grant opportunities that are already in the hopper that we might as a city be pursuing, or ones that you hope that we pursue? And how do you feel about that number overall in terms of that outlay? Yeah,
I think that's fine. And, since we're getting ready to close this off, it might as well bring this up in conjunction with it, that even after all of that set aside, we're going to have almost 19 million left to spend that has to be, allocated by 2024 and spent by 2026. So we've actually got a pretty long timetable on this. And so I know, one of the final pieces of the discussion was setting aside extra on these in case a program really takes off, or there's another need identified, or more budget is necessary in all of this. So, if they think 3 million is a good starting point, I think that's just fine. And absolutely there's potential out there for grants. And you covered it perfectly. They are going to do it as a matching fund. And also some of this will become more clear as the Parks Master Plan continues to unfold. I know the Parks Director has looked at some iconic parks around the nation. And so maybe this means that we'll get something really innovative and iconic for our city. And you know, that very briefly, this might give us a good opportunity to talk about what else we might like to see. And as our audience well knows, as you well know, we've been advocating for the city to invest robustly in our urban tree canopy. And so I would like to see that come into the parks piece. You know, putting aside a little bit more money for that. And I would also add that something else that I'd like to see that kind of goes along with our natural environment and parks and livability of our city. Because this is kind of a wonky piece of our charter, I think we ought to set up a sidewalks grant to improve people's sidewalks and the walkability of our community, because it's something that has it's weirdly outlined in our charter, and so we need kind of a backdoor mechanism to improve this that doesn't run through the city's general budget. Do you guys have any ideas of what else you might like to see out of that money?
Well, I mean, I love your suggestions and just want to echo them as well. You know, I think we need to get back on the Tree Cities list, and we need to not just get back on it. We need to think about being competitive about being on it.
Yeah.
And think about how every year I'd love it if we tried to say every year we want to climb, you know, 2 or 3 or 4, you know, sort of rings on the ladder and keep sort of going up on the rankings. You know, I was on a trip recently and went through small towns that actually had signs at the border of their towns, proudly displaying the fact that they were part of the Tree Cities program. And, you know, it's one of those investments that is just so low cost, so high impact, that to not think about it in this moment in time, right? I think just makes so much sense. So every dollar to me that goes to beautification, that goes to green space and goes to amenities, as a community, we expect to see a return on that, you know, and when you think about in this moment in time, these dollars initially came to us with the idea of stimulating our economy, of stimulating our city, of getting us back on our feet, and preparing us for the 21st century after COVID. And when you think about some of these investments that really sort of have returns year after year after year, it really does come down to the public spaces. You know, it comes down to accessibility, to walkability, and to parks. You know, so if all of that additional allocation, Josh, honestly, if it went to accessibility on sidewalks and to expansion of green space and trees, I wouldn't have a single issue with that at all in terms of what things it could go to. The only other piece that I would think about is economic development. You know, so there's a small business outlay. I'd like to see something on the economic development side. You know, I'd like to see us as a city embrace some kind of physical workspace incubator model. You know, Texas Tech University has one on their campus. I'd like to see something where the city collaborates in a public-private partnership way and tries to build out some kind of new startup space for companies that are doing things relevant to our economy. So I think something in agriculture, encouraging sort of small-scale farming and having some types of facilities or spaces there that's beneficial to them. I think investing in our market structures, you know, so downtown, a lot of communities invest in essentially either physical structures or city structures or cold storage facilities for farming vendors so that they can come into town and make sure that they have their produce that's available. We need to do that. We need to embrace our small scale markets. Those are just sort of, to me, investments that really make a lot of sense on the economic development side, but also just simply are in line with the types of economic activity that's happening here, right? And it's just consistent overall. So,
yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that. Those are all great things. And so that was the American Rescue Plan Act updates. I know it was a lot, but lots of good info. Just one last reminder, the county does have money for small businesses available. You can go to their website and look at what the requirements are for that, but they are encouraging folks to grab that money, and you might as well because it's there. And then also some of these other programs, again, won't be rolled out for probably several weeks. So All right, so moving right along. So I will give you the gist of what's going on with our electrical situation, and then I will hand it off to Dr. Nick so he can masterfully kind of break it down for you.
In like
So
30 seconds.
right. So basically, Lubbock is moving in a direction to where LP&L is not going to be the only service provider for electricity, and this is coming obviously because we've joined the ERCOT network, and this is part of it. So this is not anything new on their network. This is kind of just what happens. And so a city has a decision to make. Do they want to be the provider of last resort or not? And there's some different things there. But basically, there should be quite a few different options for you to choose from once this is rolled out. And from the presentation they showed, which we won't get into all those weeds, but the prices do vary quite a bit, and it goes by kilowatt hour. So some of them were as high as 17 cents per kilowatt hour, some of them were as low as 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And then of course there's like a rating system like you have on anything with the stars, and people can leave reviews and things of that nature. And so my hope and my belief is, because that's generally what happens when you have a situation like this, is when you have more competition, that's better for consumers. And so that's my hope, is that it will eventually be better than our current monopoly situation that we have going on. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Nick.
Yeah, so to kind of wrap this up, you likely as a Lubbock citizen, you've heard that the city of Lubbock is going through the process of joining ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. So this is an energy marketplace that is structured as what's called a deregulated market. What that means is that different layers of the energy process of creating that electron that ultimately then goes through transmission lines, gets generated, goes to transmission lines, goes through conversion to the voltage that's in your house, and eventually gets into your refrigerator or your appliances, that each step of that process, they have to be separate companies. So when we join the ERCOT marketplace, what will happen is, rather than Lubbock Power and Light being in charge of finding energy for us, being in charge of maintaining our power lines, and then being in charge of providing us customer service, Lubbock Power and Light will only take one role within that process. Lubbock Power and Light will become something called a distribution transmission utility company. So what that will mean is that Lubbock Power and Light, you will no longer see them on your bill, but they will still own all of the electric lines, the meters, everything like that are in our community. So whenever the power goes out, whenever a transmission line fails, that's still LP&L, that it has to do something about it. But when you call somebody to figure out what the power outage reason is, and whenever you're trying to connect a new place, you're trying to see if you can get a different rate for your power and energy, it won't be LP&L that you'll be having that conversation with. It will be a private party, a third party private sector entity that will exist specifically to be your service provider. So their role in all this is that they will go out into the energy marketplace and they will find energy for you. And you will sign a contract with them for them to bring energy to you. And if you have problems, if there are issues that happen, if your power gets cut off, you want to add power, things like that, that becomes the company that you will interface with when we join what is called the choice marketplace. Now, whether or not we join that marketplace is a conversation that is currently ongoing in the city of Lubbock. The council will make essentially a go, no-go decision that is really this is the final checkpoint for us going into this process. And that is scheduled to happen in the beginning of the second quarter of the year. So sometime March, April, likely, is when this conversation is going to happen. And it is a critical one because it is the point of no return. And so the history here is that this is unprecedented. There has never been a city in the state of Texas who has what I will say voluntarily opted in to the ERCOT marketplace. And so this will be a very historical moment, not just in Lubbock, but actually across the entire state of Texas. I know a lot of people have felt concerns about joining ERCOT because of the polar vortex and what that has sort of devastated a lot of the state of Texas itself. What I will say is that 70% of the city of Lubbock is already in ERCOT. So The vote here is not whether or not we will join ERCOT or not. That decision has already happened. 70% of our power is already in the ERCOT marketplace. The other 30% will come online in, I believe, sometime 2023 is sort of the timeline for this. And that's the final checkpoint for when we switch to the what's called the choice marketplace. So the council will vote as to whether or not LP&L will sort of step behind the scenes and just sort of be the transmission line maintainer, operator of meters in our community, and whether or not you'll start to interface with an external private sector party for your customer service needs and your energy needs. Now, what does that mean for you? It means that you'll have a lot more options of the kinds of ways that you'll buy energy. So right now with LP&L, when you get your energy bill, it is a set price all the time. There's no variation there. You get effectively a price charge for the amount of kilowatt hours that you consume over the span of a month. What retail electric providers are capable of doing is giving you options when it comes to pricing. So as an example, a lot of them will provide you variable pricing, which means that during certain times of the day, your energy costs will be higher or lower. And so you could pick a plan where your energy costs, say during the nighttime, are higher or lower, or your energy costs during the daytime are higher or lower. And the idea is that you can make choices about when you're using your energy that maybe will be able to get you some savings at the end of the day. So the other thing there too is that retail electric providers, that's what they're called, these service entities, will likely have a much more favorable view of, say, solar panels. So Lubbock Power and Light, one of the reasons why we don't see a lot of solar panels in Lubbock, even though we have incredible solar capacity capability. So in the rating system for solar energy, Lubbock is one level below, say, Death Valley, Nevada, when it comes to clear days and the amount of energy that could be generated here through solar. Now, LP&L, the reason why we don't see a lot of it here is that if you buy solar panels on your property right now, the compensation that you receive for the energy that you generate through LP&L is not very good. They give you a very, 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 very below market rate for any energy that you generate. And so as a result of that, there's not really a strong incentive for you to actually do it. Retail electric providers that are a bit more savvy about these things are going to see the value in that and likely will be offering what are called power purchase agreements, where they'll either own solar panels that they'll put on top of your house or they'll help you to finance them. And then they'll sign a contract with you to essentially use that energy that's being produced on top of your house. So we likely, I think one of the biggest things that people will see physically in Lubbock as a result of this transition is you will likely see a lot more solar panels going up when this occurs. And hopefully through competition, that we'll see some decline in energy pricing as these various private sector companies compete for your business.
Right. Yeah. Would you also be able to like buy green energy?
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, absolutely. So you also have the ability to choose the kind of energy that
that's what you wanted, or yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Your lack of broadband is showing. But Josh, you're exactly right. Once the retail electric providers come into play, they will have the ability to actually sell you specific kinds of energy. So for example, if you want to be 100% renewable energy, that is the only sources of energy that you want to have, you can do that. And essentially you'll contract with a retail electric provider that will guarantee you that, or a retail electric provider that offers a renewable energy plan. So you will also have that ability to choose energy that's powering your home from more sustainable locations. So that's a really good point. I should have mentioned that. So it's another one of the benefits of having that type of program here.
Yeah, well, great. Anything else to add, Josh, before we sign off here?
No, well, yes, but we're out of time, so we'll just save it for the next show.
All right, we'll save it for the next show.
Wait, I would say, if you were a volunteer on MLK Day, if you came out and did service, I have it on good authority from people who would know such things that it was the best MLK service day that they've ever seen. I'd like to thank all those people. The volunteers were amazing. And it's really nice to be back on the show with you guys. Happy New Year.
Yeah, it is nice to be back.
it's
We
good.
we were
Good
just
energy.
talking
Yeah.
about that. Yeah, right before the show started. We miss doing this every week for you guys. And so with that being said, we will be right back here next Wednesday at the same time. And just your weekly reminder to join your neighborhood association. And we will see you right